one thing I tell people when they're trying to do a transition into more minimal is I tell them there's two ways you can go about it. You can go cold turkey and just go barefoot or really minimal barefoot shoes. I call that cold turkey. But there are a lot of people out there that are runners that don't want to give up their mileage base, that don't want to give up their aerobic base. Okay, so they're going, well, if I go barefoot, I'm going to have to cut my mileage way back, and I'm really not into that. And so what I tell people is you can either do it just, one run a week, just get your feet and legs used to this little minimal thing, and then gradually build into it. Keep your other shoes, but really feel the difference, and they'll start gravitating towards less and less of a shoe. The other way you can go about it, if somebody just absolutely is wants to keep their mileage base and not change that base, then you can, whatever shoe that they are running in, you can just recommend a little bit less of a shoe and say, this is just a step down. Keep your mileage, but be aware that you're going to be running in less of a shoe and really work at moving differently. And then the next time they come in, you get them a little less of a shoe, get them into a Newton, get them into a barefoot shoe. So the high mileage, if you want to keep that, you got to change shoes gradually. Or if you want to get rid of your shoes, you start from scratch and you build up gradually. Either way, it's got to be gradual.
Right. I guess along those lines, one of the good things is there's a lot of education coming out of this. A year and a half ago, when the books first came out and a lot of the magazine articles came out, one of the things I heard last week was the running industry never as a whole reacted and said, oh my gosh, there's a front page New York Times article saying you shouldn't run in running shoes. And everyone was kind of individually on one level kind of saying something, but no one collectively came out and said anything. So the good news now is a lot of brands, Newton included, but also New Balance and others that are doing a lot of education. I know that New Balance said last week they're not going to sell any of their new Minimus line without a kind of a point of sale, kind of touchy-feely kind of interaction with the customer, which is good. And I think that probably from the retail point of view, that can probably help quite a bit. I guess along the line of continuing that transition, I guess from the physical point of view, maybe Jay or Irene, I guess talk about maybe the importance of drills and strength. I think one of the things that people, when they get into running, you just go out and run. You don't realize that it's more than just running. There's no other sport that it's just that sport. I mean, but running, people go out and run. They run 5 miles. That's their workout for the day. But the importance of these drills and strength building and everything else is as important, I would think.
The new Newton shoes that come out next season are actually going to come with Irene and I in a box, and we'll be able to go and talk now. So yeah, it's part of the thing. We talked about, Irene talked about the continuum. I use orthotics with folks as part of a comprehensive intervention plan when needed. My goal is not to have you have that, as she said, in 4 shoes all day long, et cetera, et cetera. I have put people in ASICS Foundations and talking to Grid Stables and Brooks Beast when appropriate as part of a plan to work on their issues. I approach, of course we do research, but whenever someone comes to see us for evaluation, they're an N of 1. They're their own little personal study, and my goal is to help them. So my goals are, long term to sort of help them work on their deficits. And so I think that if the other shoes you have on your wall, serve some purpose in some capacities and in some people, okay? But I think for the most part, we talked about those 3 things that we at UVA kind of see work well. If someone wants to make the transition into a more minimal shoe or barefoot design, they need to have, again, mobility of the posterior structures, the Achilles and plantar fascia mobility. They need to have adequate strength. They have to have good balance. And so, as part of this transition program, I think it's you guys need to make a point to your customers and say, look, let's talk about these 3 things right now while you're here. Let me show you why they're important as we transition a portion of your miles into more minimal footwear or in a barefoot. Here's some things I need you to work on ongoing. Do I need you to put an hour of exercise in a week on this? No. Okay. Standing on one leg 30 seconds 20 times a day when you're brushing your teeth, washing dishes, pouring cereal, barbecuing burgers, drinking a beer, beer drinking is a good balance skill. The idea is doing these things often. Balance and proprioception improves very quickly when you do it in short periods throughout the day. Balance is not something you work on one time a week for a half hour and try and kill yourself. You don't get good gains that way. So I think, again, it's, our Zola's foot structure is strong enough to be able to just literally just go. Okay, your foot structure is not. So you need to do some things to strengthen your foot structure. And if you want to make that transition, that's something I view as paramount. So.
One of the questions that I often get asked is, okay, so if you've got a pretty healthy foot and you don't have injuries, you probably can transition and you can do what you need to do and get into a minimal shoe, but what about people who are injured? And I have to tell you that I am learning, and I've learned as a therapist. Most of what I've learned is from my patients not listening to me. So when the Nike Free came out, for example, I had a patient who I was making orthotics for. He had a very flat pes planus foot. And I told him, like any good therapist, absolutely not. This is not the shoe for you. It's not designed for people who have plantar fasciitis and flat feet. He went out and got it anyways while we were trying to get his orthotics modified, and he did just fine. And so what I'm learning is that I don't think we know what the right and left limits are. I think that, I believe that if you can run, even injured, because we all, 50% of runners get injured in a given year, in a pair of regular shoes, you probably can run in minimal footwear or in barefoot. I really do. I believe that you can get there with appropriate transition. I had this one very incredible case. The kid that came to me had compartment syndrome, which is you have these compartments of muscles in your leg, and when you get too much pressure in them, it hurts, and it put pressure on the nerves and the vessels, and you end up with foot drop. This kid had 8 compartment syndromes. In every compartment of both lower legs, 8 compartment syndromes. And he went to what I consider a very conservative physician in my town, who's a runner himself. He did 8 fasciotomies. 8. So this kid had 8 fasciitis, and he was an incredibly intense kid, just a chemical engineer now at UD, but really intense. Now he ended up having 3 different pair of orthotics made for him, and he was told never to get out of those orthotics ever, because he had some pes planus, his arch was flat. He had all kinds of motion control and cushioning shoes, and he finally had to give up his season. He was running competitively with foot drop. And the only way you can do that is increasing your hip and knee, talk about high knees. So anyway, he was running competitively. That's how intense he was. So this kid decided not to run. He came to Delaware. He couldn't make it through the season. Very, very talented, was one of the top runners in our state. Anyways, he ended up being introduced to a minimal shoe. Well, it doesn't even matter which shoe it was. It was a minimal shoe that wasn't cushioning, and that kid ended up just winning a local marathon by 15 minutes. He's running incredibly fast. He's fast. He's won every race he's run. Now, he got into those shoes last November, and it was April when he ran that marathon. And what it was, I'm not saying the shoes were magic. When I looked at his running, he was way up on his heel. He has pictures of it. He knew it, and he could not get off his heel. And the only solution to his problem was getting back to natural running. So there's a very extreme case that 5 years ago, I would have said, motion control shoes, orthotics, stop running. Yeah, I mean, everything that this particular physician had said to him. So I think that we just, when they come to you and say, I've had injuries, I think it is good to maybe suggest them to a physical therapist or an athletic trainer if you feel like it's outside your realm. But once that injury is calmed down, I really believe if you've got an intact neuromuscular system that you can transition if you do it appropriately.